Morning, folks. Um, so it's been about 2 weeks since we processed this clay, um, and I went ahead and ran most of that tub through into other tubs and into a couple of buckets. And I've got one of those buckets here, and I thought I'd show you the next step. So, and today's going to be a good day for it because they're talking about it's gonna be in the neighborhood of 106, 108 degrees today. And we've had some pretty high temperatures lately, so the humidity is not too terrible. It's still humid, but it's not as humid as it could be. Anyway, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So, bucket of processed clay that's been fitting and soaking, and it's been ran through the sieves, and like I said, it's been about 2 weeks. And the point where you start thinking that you're getting close to being ready is at the point that you come out and there's not a whole lot of standing water on it. While it's soaking, one of the things you can and should do if you're looking to use it fairly quickly is take a sponge and just kind of suck up some of the standing water. So I got a little bit this morning, not too terribly much, and significantly less than I had been getting. So I'm going to show you real quick. This bucket started out being full, and I haven't taken anything out of it, and that's the level it's at now. So that's how much it's given up of water and other things. Okay, so water. You get a little bit of slip when you soak up the water, but not too terribly much. Yeah. So it will decrease in volume substantially. As it does that, it's getting more dense. So here's my picture here real quick. All right, so got a picture to get it out with. The other thing that you're going to need is, if you're doing this outside, you need something to cover it with. I have an old pillowcase. You can get those from thrift stores, Salvation Army, stuff like that, and you can usually get them for a couple of cents, quarter, somewhere in there. You just want to make sure that it is mostly cotton, preferably all cotton, but at least mostly cotton. Polyester, nylon, acrylic, things like that don't really suck water out. What they'll do is they'll trap water on top, and so the bottom of the slab will get pretty dry pretty quick and get set up, and then the top will be really wet, so you won't be able to do anything with it. So that takes care of the stuff that we need. So I've got a wedging surface here. Like I've said before, this is a concrete wedging surface. You could use plaster, you could use wood, you could use sheetrock, backer board, things like that. My advice, if you're going to use sheetrock, is you get a piece of canvas to cover it. Otherwise, it will pull the paper off the sheetrock, and you'll end up with little bits of paper in your clay, and that's no good. Surface. You want to make sure it's clean. Okay, so this doesn't look clean, but it's pretty clean. What you want to make sure is there's no chunks, large bits, foreign matter. Anything that's on this surface now is going to end up in your clay. And if it's small, dry pieces, that's not going to matter because that will rehydrate as this clay sets up. So, surface clean. Right. Go ahead and do this. It's going to look fairly thin. That's okay. Just like making a big pancake. When it's thinner like this, the upside, you don't have to work with it this thin. You can wait till it thickens up some more. I like starting it with when it's this thin, because what it will do is it will flow out and it will kind of set up a nice even sort of level. All right. And that's basically all there is to that port. Just get it kind of spread out, make sure there are no really thick spots. Okay, so depending on the weather, like I said, today's going to be fairly excessively hot. You'll want to keep an eye on this. Check back on it every so often. Make sure that it's not drying, especially the edges. Make sure your edges aren't drying out too quickly. If you notice your edges are drying out fairly quickly, or a lot quicker, and they will dry out quicker than the rest of it, you can wet this piece of cloth or whatever you have covering it. Wet that down. You can spray it with a spray bottle. The other thing you can do, and you'll want to do this anyway, is as this dries, you want to get your scraper and get it underneath the edges and flip them in to the sections that are not as dry. That'll help kind of control the rate that everything's drying at. Alright, that's nice and happy. Okay, so this will probably take, even on a warm, dry day, it'll probably take in the neighborhood of most of the day to set up to the point where we can wedge it. I may force this to go till tomorrow. I know this looks like a large bit of clay. It will actually shrink down significantly. It'll probably end up being about 20 pounds, maybe a little bit less. So, all right, so we'll check back in a little bit and see where we're at. Howdy, folks. All right, so it's been a couple of days, and it's actually taken a little bit longer than I was anticipating. A couple of nights I had to cover this with a piece of plastic just because we had a chance of rain, and that would be kind of like taking 2 steps backwards if it got rained on. So it doesn't really dry out all that well when it's covered with plastic, but we've gotten there. It's still a little soft, and that's okay, because as you're wedging it on the surface, it will absorb some of the water. You'll get some spots where it'll start sticking more. If it starts doing that, just move to a drier spot. As you can see, it's thicker now. What I did is, as the edges were drying out, I folded them in towards the middle where it wasn't drying out very much at all, and that kind of just evens out the moisture level. And when we wedge it up, it'll even it out even more. So, wedging. A couple of different ways you can wedge. Some people prefer what's called ram's head wedging, which is basically you take and you hold the clay on the side and you push it down, roll it back up on itself. And the reason it's called ram's head is you end up with these cinnamon bun looking things on the side, and when you look at the whole thing, it kind of looks like a sheep's head. And that works. Some people are better at that than they are at spiral wedging. Some people are better at spiral wedging. A lot of old school potters tell you the only proper way to wedge is spiral wedging. So before I do that, though, what I'm going to do is called rough wedging. And basically you kind of just push it out from the center to the edges, fold those in, turn it 90 degrees, and do it again. The reason I'm doing that is that gets a good portion of air that's trapped in the center out. As you can see, it's starting to get pretty damp here. It's starting to stick a little bit. So we'll move it over here. Make sure we're still in the picture. Good. All right. Now we're going to do what's called spiral wedging. So to spiral wedge, pull it up, push it down, pull it up, turn it a couple of degrees, push it down. You just do that. Over and over again. The purpose of wedging is twofold. One, it gets air out of the clay, and you want to make sure that you get as much of the air out as you can. Here. Air and clay is a bad thing. One, if you're throwing, it'll actually help, or it'll cause your piece to go off balance. And two, there's a very likely chance that if you have air inner piece, when you put it in the kiln, you'll get a little small explosion. Not like movie explosion with flames and stuff like that, but your piece will blow up. The other reason is you're trying to get all of the clay particles kind of going the same way, nice and aligned, so they're flat and overlapping. And what you don't want is you don't want them like this. All right, if they're crisscrossing and kind of going every which way, that can also cause your piece to blow up in the kiln. The other thing it'll do is cause what are called S cracks, which is kind of just like a little S-shaped crack in the bottom of a piece, mostly in the bottom. All right. You're going to want to do this 60 to 80 times minimum. The longer you can do it, the better, to a point. Just remember that you're going to be constantly pulling moisture out of this clay as you're wedging it. And it is actually possible to wedge clay to the point where it's too stiff to work with. So, like I said, the longer you can actually do this, the better. But that's kind of the gist of it. You can leave it in this spiral shape if you want. Some people like to work with it from this and just take pieces off, and that way everything's kind of already going in one direction. Some people swear by it and say it's the only way to do it. Try it for yourself, see? Try both types of wedging for yourself also. See what you feel better with. I'd recommend practicing both. Sometimes the ram's head wedging is actually better for smaller batches of clay. 1.5, 2 pounds. Just because it's kind of hard to get your hands. If you get, at least if you got big ginormous hands like I've got, it's hard to get them to cooperate when you're doing spiral wedging on smaller pieces. Personally, I do think that the spiral wedging is more effective, so if at all possible, that's what I use. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Alright, hopefully that gives you the gist of it. And I think our next clip is going to be throwing some pieces with this clay. So stay tuned for those.